You feel wrong? Well, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's good to be with you all this morning. Thank you for coming out. My name is Donele McEachin, and I have the privilege of representing Virginia's 4th Congressional District. It's great to join you today for a conversation on clean energy jobs and the importance of a swift and just transition to a green collar economy that works for all communities. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. I know all of us look forward to hearing your insights and learning about your work to promote an inclusive, clean energy economy. As we all know, for far too long, our nation has relied on dirty fossil fuels to power our society. Trying not to knock everybody's notes over here. That reliance has wreaked havoc on our planet and has dangerously altered our climate. Global temperatures continue to rise, melting polar ice caps and causing sea levels to rise, which could threaten the very existence of our coastal communities. Climate change has also caused severe and deadly weather events such as hurricanes, droughts, and floods to occur more often and more violently. While the effects of climate change are felt by everyone, we know that the worst effects fall hardest on communities of color, low-income communities, and other vulnerable groups who lack appropriate infrastructure, resources, and support. If we want to leave our children a habitable planet, and if we want to break the more than century-long cycle of environmental injustice, we urgently need to move away from dirty fossil fuels and towards sustainable, clean energies like wind, solar, and geothermal. And these changes need to happen now because tomorrow is really too late. If done correctly, the benefits of this energy transition are clear. Moving to clean, renewable energies will reduce pollution, improve public health, and help minimize and mitigate the damaging effects of climate change. Making these investments will also create well-paying, green-collar jobs that will spur local, state, and national economic growth and development. My home state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, is helping to lead the way on some of these issues. During the time that I had the privilege to be in the General Assembly, I passed legislation that laid the groundwork for wind turbines that will soon be off Virginia's coast. When completed, this development will be the nation's 2nd largest commercial scale source of offshore wind and energy. Already this project is creating and sustaining well-paying jobs, and that's just the beginning. All told, offshore wind has the potential to create more than 15,000 jobs in Virginia alone. As we transition to the green collar economy, however, it is imperative that new jobs and other benefits be broadly available to minority and low-income communities, not just to a fortunate few. That means all communities need to have a seat at the table. For far too long, decisions about energy and infrastructure have been made without input or involvement from the communities first hit and worst by the climate change those decisions have helped to drive. Low-income communities and communities of color are borne a disproportionate and deeply unjust burden. If we are truly going to invest in an economy that works for all individuals, it is critical that historically marginalized and underserved communities have decision-making authority. If we do that, and I know that we can, the transition to clean, renewable energies will mean much-needed job opportunities and improved health for these communities. We are fortunate enough to be joined by these knowledgeable panelists who are pushing for exactly that kind of just transition. As a very fortunate member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Natural Resources Committee, and the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, I am dedicated to working with groups like WEAC to champion clean energy policies and generate greater opportunity for all. I know that together we can right the wrongs of the past, and I know that we can leave our children a healthy, livable world, just the kind that they deserve to inherit. I'm pleased and blessed to be a partner in that work, and like you, I'm looking forward to our panelists' discussion of how we achieve our goal. Thank you for being here, and to our panelists, thank you for your knowledge. Good
morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning for this important discussion on creating an inclusive, renewable energy economy powered by green-collar jobs. My name is Kerene, Tayloe, and I serve as the Director of Federal Legislative Affairs for We Act for Environmental Justice. We Act for Environmental Justice is a 31-year-old nonprofit organization based in Harlem, New York, with a federal policy office here in Washington, D.C. We Act works to build healthy communities by organizing residents of color and low-income people to engage in the creation of sound and fair environmental health and protection policies and practices. We Act provides leadership within the national environmental justice movement and works to influence the creation of federal, state, and local policies affecting the environment and public health. 5 years ago, We Act's Washington, D.C. office was created to provide a voice for vulnerable communities on federal policy and to coordinate and convene the Environmental Justice Leadership Forum on Climate Change, a multiracial, multi-ethnic network of 43 member organizations working in 22 states to impact policy on climate change and energy. So at We Act, we're working every day to improve the planet one community at a time by empowering people to power change. And so again, we're excited to have our wonderful panelists here today. I'm just gonna introduce them by stating their name, but then provide them with time to go into what their organization does so that we can hurry up and begin our discussion. So to my left, we have Cecil Corbin-Mark from We Act for Environmental Justice, Dr. Beverly Wright from the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, Wallace from Power 52, and Donele Wilkins from Green Door Initiative. And so I'm gonna go ahead and allow, starting with Cecil, for our panelists to just share what their organization's doing around creating inclusive green-collar jobs for their organizations.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to thank Congressman McEachin for this opportunity, and certainly want to thank the Energy, Environment, and Agriculture Task Force for the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm going to lay out a little bit of background, and then I'll talk a little bit about what We Act has done, given the facts that I'm going to put on the table to help advance green, clean, renewable energy job opportunities for people in our community, while also tackling the climate crisis and the public health crisis that communities like Northern Manhattan face. 18% of all energy in the United States was produced by renewable sources in 2017, including solar and wind installations. That constitutes an increase from the 15% registered in 2016, with that shift driven by new solar and wind projects and a dip in the share of natural gas generation. Meanwhile, both greenhouse gas emissions from power generation and consumer spending power declined. Renewables' share of US energy consumption has now doubled since 2008, as coal's share crashed in the same period from 48 to 30%. And while the current administration in the White House has signaled a desire to cut funding for renewable energy and efficiency programs, the trends seem set to continue thanks to market forces. Solar and wind comprised roughly 62% of new power construction in 2017, as their cost continues to plummet. And 2.9 gigawatts of renewable energy projects were initiated last year, while 12.5 gigawatts of coal plants are set to shut down were slated to shut down in 2018 as part of an accelerating trend. Thanks to the shift, the solar and wind industries are creating jobs faster than the rest of the economy. These findings come from the 2018 Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book, produced each year by the Business Council for Sustainable Energy and Bloomberg New Energy Finance. As of 2019, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the unemployment rates for African Americans at 6.8% and Latinos at 4.9% are significantly higher than those for our white counterparts at 3.5%. In 2017, the energy and energy efficiency sectors accounted for nearly 7% of nationwide job creation. Almost 3.2 million Americans work in solar and wind and energy efficiency, clean vehicles and energy storage, and related energy jobs. Despite that growth in the sector, access for all is not the hallmark, and the energy sector remains less diverse than the nationwide workforce. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the oil and gas extraction industry is 90% white, while the utility industry is 85% white. And you don't have to dig too deep into that data to see, like these other energy industries, white men currently dominate the solar industry. Compared with fossil fuel technologies, which are typically mechanized and capital intensive, the renewable energy industry is more labor intensive. Solar panels don't get installed without people. Wind farms need technicians for maintenance. This means that on average, more jobs are created for each unit of electricity generated from renewable sources than from fossil fuels. And for the sake of our energy, environmental, and climate justice future, this reality cannot be allowed to stand as is. The renewable energy sector must include not only white men, but women and people of color. And We Act for Environmental Justice doesn't argue for diversity in the renewable energy sector just for diversity's sake. In fact, study after study shows that companies with more diverse workforces and executive boards see higher financial returns. Now, that's why we must all take a closer look at who's being included and who's being left behind. Renewable energy and climate change is a real factor. Frontline communities are facing the worst brunt of this problem. In the United States, about 29% of global warming emissions come from our electricity sector, and most of those emissions come from fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. In contrast, most renewable energy sources produce little to no global warming emissions, even when including and thinking about life cycle emissions of clean energy. There's also a public health cost. The air and water pollution emitted by coal and natural gas plants is linked with breathing problems, neurological damage, heart attacks, cancer, premature deaths, and a host of other serious problems. The pollution affects everyone. One Harvard University study estimated the life cycle costs and public health effects of coal to be an estimated $74.6 billion every year. This equivalent is the equivalent of 4.36 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity produced, about 1/3 of the average electricity rate of a typical US home. While the public health impacts of pollution from fossil fuels affect everyone, children, communities of color, and low-income communities bear a disproportionate burden of the negative health effects. We Act has worked for 2 decades with Dr. Federica Pereira of the Columbia Center for Children's Environmental Health, who wrote the following: children, and especially the poor, bear a disproportionate burden of disease and developmental impairment from both environmental pollutions and climate change due to the combustion of coal, oil, gasoline, diesel, and natural gas. I envision a future fossil fuel as the modern-day version of a many-headed hydra in Greek mythology, inflicting multiple forms of health and developmental harm in children through its emissions of toxic pollutants and carbon dioxide. Were we to slay the hydra by transitioning to sustainable and renewable energy sources for transport, electricity generation, and industry, we could reap lasting benefits for children. So in that context, We Act, sort of after the wake of Superstorm Sandy, proposed the development of a SUN solution for us. SUN standing for Solar Uptown Now. It's a strong partnership with We Act in the lead, our partners Solar One for technological capabilities, Sustainable CUNY, which is a part of the City University of New York, and the Office of the Mayor of the City of New York. Our funding partners include the Office of the Mayor of the City of New York, the Governor of New York, Andrew M. Cuomo, New York State's Labor Department, West Harlem Development Corp, Bay and Paul Foundation, and the Kresge Foundation. We focus in this partnership on 3 types of affordable housing. That's low to moderate income cooperatives, mission-driven 501c3 affordable housing, and public housing in the New York City area, which is known as NYCHA housing. We have recruited people from the community to be a part of this partnership. Those who live in the affordable cooperatives, low to moderate income cooperatives, we've organized them into a marketplace. We put an RFP that we developed collaboratively with the residents that we've organized out onto the street for the selection of the solar installer. We required, as part of access to this market, the guarantee that they would hire our trained workers from the neighborhood, and we were able to successfully select a solar installer. That's Grid Electric 770, and they are the only female owned business in New York that's certified as a solar installer in the city. We've successfully completed 5 Tenant built 5 affordable housing cooperatives at this particular point. And we've been able to, through that project, put to work a number of our trainees on those roofs as well. The training program is both a solar installation training program as well as training in OSHA 30 for construction, as well as BPI, which is Building Performance Training Course. We are providing scaffolding training as well as some of our trainees have been able to secure asbestos licenses. Over the past year, in 2018, we trained more than 365 residents, and we have been able to successfully place them in jobs across the city, but most happily, we are really proud of the fact that we've been able to put them to work in their own communities, putting up solar panels. I'll stop there, and I'll take questions later on.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Beverly Bryan. I'm director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I'm going to try not to go into a lot of detail about why we're here and why we do what we do, because I think that groundwork has been pretty much laid. But I would like to tell you a little bit about our history. We've been in existence since 1992 as a response to the environmental pollution that existed in the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor. That's an area of land between New Orleans and Baton Rouge that housed 136 petrochemical plants and 6 refineries, polluting the air, water, and soil, and killing and making Louisianians sick. We are of the top, we have the highest cancer rate in the nation. Of the top 10 cancers, Louisiana is #1 in 7 of 10. So while we keep hearing that, you know, these polluting facilities don't harm us, the research shows otherwise, but you know there are alternative facts. So these things don't seem to permeate the discourse in Louisiana. So our center really started as a response to that, to build the capacity of community members to begin getting into this fight to reduce the toxic release inventory numbers that existed in the corridor, which were at 800 million pounds in 1984, literally polluting the air, water, and soil. And when we were able to back check those numbers, maybe 8 years later, we found out it was more like 1.2 billion pounds, because these numbers are self-reported. So we have a real problem with sickness and death due to pollution in our state. And the center began there, but the program, we have many programs that deal with community resilience. Of course, we had Katrina, name it, we've just been working all over the map to improve the lives of families and children in the region and building the capacity of community-based organizations to get in the fight and fight for the sustainability of the communities and their health. But there was one program that we started in 1994. It was funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Science. It was called the Minority Worker Training Program. And the money really came out of the Superfund, right? It was mostly promoted by unions, labor unions. But somebody decided, I don't know how it happened, that we needed to grow the workforce in the area of hazardous waste, and they looked around and realized that African Americans were not there. And so there was this outreach to historic HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, to get them to develop an HBCU consortium to start working with minorities, specifically African Americans, to bring them into this field. To move forward, we're now almost 25 years funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. We've changed lives in training young people in the area of hazardous waste. What made this program really worthwhile was the fact that the young men and women who worked in this program also lived in areas polluted by Superfund sites or brownfields. So, you know, we began to see a transformation in some communities because we were actually providing jobs in an area where there were none, and providing skills to young people and older people who really needed it. The transformation has been amazing. In fact, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences conducted a study of recent economic analysis of the worker training program, or it was called Minority Worker Training. It changed to Environmental Careers Worker Training Program, but it's the same program. And it estimates a cumulative total value added because of this program to be $1.8 billion from 1995 to 2013. And that's, I'm not an economist, but they dealt with all factors, and the one that stands in my mind is that it costs, $32,000 a year to keep a person in prison, whereas this program costs us about $17,000 per person initially. We have that down now to about $8,000 per person to train them so that they could become a part of the workforce. That means that families are not on welfare, it means that people are not in prison, and so they did that kind of analysis for the population that we were working with. And I'm saying this because we have been in the process now of not transforming, but adding to our existing program the kinds of skills that young people need to be involved in renewable energy, this economy, solar panels, and dealing with wind turbines. We also do a lot of other things like, if you're in the area, you need confined space and all kinds of OSHA cards, all of these other certifications to be able to work in this area. And what I'm seeing is that if we don't approach the renewable energy spectrum in the way that we should, we'll end up once again leaving out a critical component of our society that can make life better for all of us. And that is focusing as well on these populations who are undereducated, hard to serve, living in areas with a lot of contamination, also living in areas where they are hit the hardest from climate change. And so I see this move to expand the types of programs that we work with that have a proven track record. We're able to show the value added in these projects as this being one of the sources for providing the training that our population needs to move forward. We're talking about a holistic program, and what's different about this program is that it is holistic. They not only get the basic academics, but they get life skills. They get study skills. We're bringing people back into a learning process where in the past they've never had a positive experience. And so bringing them back into a situation where they have one-on-one kind of assistance from other people who look just like them, having the same problems that they have. Our graduation rate, for the most part, is about 98%. When we lose a student, it's usually because they have to go to jail. I'm just being straight. They were in drug court for something. We've been working with them. And they have to drop out because they got to go finish 30 days in jail for not showing up at a court date or something like that. Our employment rate for our students on average is about 71%, and that's because we're now in 5 states. The consortium includes communities in Pensacola, Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, Detroit, Michigan, and you'll hear from Donele, Houston, Texas, and Savannah, Georgia. Over the 25 years we've been in numerous states, we've literally trained thousands of young people and changed their lives, stories that we get all the time. And we believe that the environmental justice organizations who have been at the forefront of the drive for the change in policy and legislation that can help clean up our communities and improve the quality of their lives are actually ready, to begin the same kind of training. We have the infrastructure already in place, outreach and recruitment, connections to communities, and technical trainers with skills to do this work. We really would like to make certain that as we move forward in this new, greener economy, that we make certain that we put in place what needs to be there to make certain that our communities are not left out. Thank you.
So good afternoon or good morning. My name is Rob Wallace. I'm co-founder and CEO of Power 52, and one of the great things of being third, Dr. Wright and Mr. Corbin-Mark cover like 90% of like the program we offer, which is perfect, so we can get right kind of to the mission. Our perspective and background is a little bit different, so I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I've been in the solar industry for over 12 years, over a decade, built hundreds of megawatts of projects throughout the country for local utilities, for the government, Fort Meade, Fort Campbell, you name it. And one of the consistent things I've seen across my experience is a lack of diversity within the workforce, right? I can remember going to the first solar SPI conference in Vegas, like in 2007, and I was the youngest guy and the only black guy. I was like, wow, okay, it can't get any worse than this. So, I'm thinking that it'll grow over the years. And then I go back to 2015, and I'm not the youngest man, but I'm probably one of the few African Americans in the room. It was really kind of disheartening because we knew about this boom coming for over a decade now, and we still haven't found a way to participate. So one of the things that kickstarted our program was the Freddie Gray murder in Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, grew up in Baltimore, went to Poly and Virginia Tech, and came back to Hopkins there. And when that thing happened, it kind of really like kicked into a special place for us, because I say us, our team, because we're all from Baltimore. Ray Lewis is one of my partners, co-founder, Baltimore Ravens, you know him, blah, blah, blah. Cherie Brooks is also one of our co-founders in workforce development and job creation. And what we saw there was that these youth were looking for an opportunity out. It wasn't that these are bad kids. They just had no voice. They had no way or no plan that they can put together how to get out of Baltimore, how to get out the drug game, right? And so we sat there and watched this, and we watched these kids kind of tear up their own stuff. We said, this is symptomatic of not having hope, of not having an opportunity to create wealth for their families so they can get out of Baltimore. So we came up with the Power 52 Foundation Workforce Development and Training Program. So what does that do? We focus on returning citizens, a third of our trainees, a third are veterans, and a third are high school guys and girls who may not be or have interest in college or college material, but want to have that trade, right? So we wrote this curriculum where they get what's called potable skills. So they get their OSHA 10, they get their OSHA 30 program. They get their NAVCEP certification, which is the National Association of Certified Energy Practitioners, which is a standard for solar, right? They get their NCCER construction certification, and they get an energy management certification through the BPI program, all through our training program. So when they come out, they have real skills, right? So that's great. We say, man, these guys have skills, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? If they don't have jobs, they're going right back to the streets. They get all the certifications in the world, but they come out making $4 an hour, they're going right back to hustle. I guarantee it, right? Which means right back to prison, which means right back to depression, right? Which means right back to sickness. And so we created what's called Power 52 Energy Solutions, which is our for-profit side, to hire and employ the graduates from the program. And so what we do on that side is we actually build and construct projects. We hire about 28% of our graduates. They build projects nationally. I just came back from British Virgin Islands. We're building a microgrid for the island of Anegada, which will be the first Caribbean off-grid system that's hurricane-proof. But what's amazing is I had these same guys who I remember on the streets in Baltimore when they first came in, pants were sagging, hair wasn't cut, didn't want to look someone in the eye, who are now building systems in New Hampshire, right? Who are now in upper state Ithaca, New York during projects, staying in the Airbnb, which is the first time some of them stayed in the Airbnb, in the snow, building a system. And what you see is their whole person changes. It's not just they have a skill, but the same Jonte that came in is not the same Jonte that's now working, providing for his family, and his kids are looking up to him and talking about his experience. And then he becomes the mouthpiece of the program. So to that extent, we have an 85% placement rate. We don't advertise. We have a 200-person referral list, a waiting list now in Maryland. We started with one school in Baltimore City, which myself and our team funded directly because we didn't want to get involved in the politics of grants, blah, 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 blah. We wanted to teach the kids the skills they needed that I knew they would need to be successful in this space. So we did that. And because of our placement rate, we were able to get this with funding from the state. Now we have a school in Baltimore, a school in Howard County, Prince George's County, and now in Baltimore County. So 4 schools in Maryland. We're opening 2 schools in New Jersey, in Newark and Patterson, and 1 in Graceville. What's interesting about the one in Graceville, Florida, the program starts behind the prison walls, right? It's actually at a prison. So the individuals who are scheduled to get out within 6 months to a year, they start the program behind the walls. They do the 11-week training program. They do the hands-on training. They do the boot camp. So when they get out, they already have the skills they need to go right into the workforce. And because of the mission of the program and because of the access, like for example, Ray Lewis brings, we have partners who have committed to hiring these folks. And that's why our placement rate is so high. And so my point is, when you have a strong mission, I mean, there's 1 million solar developers in the country. There's solar developers everywhere. But one thing you don't see is solar developers who are committed to investing in the communities they're building in, right? It's not about bringing in your own workforce and taking all the economic development out. It's about developing that community. So that's why our mission is for that community, by the community. When we build somewhere, we go in and train locally. When we build in BVI, we're training folks in British Virgin Islands to build that system. And that way, that economic impact stays there, the tax base increases so the politicians and the government can't complain, right? Because now there's more taxes for the country, right? And then you're increasing renewable energy. It's a skill that they can take internationally. And so that's the difference in Power 52. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as we go through the rest of the day.
And I have to follow all of this one.
You can say hi. Good morning.
Exactly, because they have shared everything that we do in the city of Detroit. I'm Donele Wilkins, the founding director of the Green Door Initiative. Our mission is to ensure that everyone is environmentally literate and able to promote and live out a sustainable lifestyle. And one of the things, it was established in 2010, and one of the things that I've been in the game of environmental justice, or the fight of environmental justice, not a game, the fight for environmental justice since its inception in the early 90s. We had the privilege of co-founding Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, and then in 2010, taking the lead and founding the Green Door Initiative. And one of the things that I set out to do and our team was to, if we had to do it over again, what would be our major focus? We were successful with ensuring that environmental justice was a household phrase, but what does environmental justice really look like in our communities? What does it look like? And to me and our team, we decided that it looks like economic justice. It looks like bright futures, strong communities. It looks like folks enjoy across the board a lifestyle that supports life and health and all that as human beings we are entitled to. So we established, my background for a long time has been in economic development, workforce development. I brought that to the work in the fight of environmental justice. And one of the things we were able to do is take advantage of the knowledge of what it takes to really build people in a way that they can contribute to their own economy and their own community. I want to thank the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, HBCU, job training program for including us. We're the only northern group outside of the Deep South Center that's a part of this. We feel very fortunate because they set a real good example and model for us to take on and adopt to Detroit. Sustainability is about local as well. And for us, it's like, what are the needs locally that we could take full advantage of? Detroit, in a lot of ways, is considered ground zero when it comes to the economy, when it comes to issues about jobs and displacement. We birthed the auto industry there, and when the auto industry decided they could do it better somewhere else, they left a lot of their junk. And in a lot of ways, people stopped counting when they decided to determine and create an inventory of brownfield sites, for instance. They stopped at 65,000 sites inside the city of Detroit alone. There, right there, are jobs as far as we're concerned. And so the model that the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice came up with that we were able to adopt for our work really helped to kind of create a framework for how do we clean up and restore sites like that? How do we add to the workforce and create that human capital that can become heroes when it comes to environmental restoration? And so that alone, training our folks, our young people in hazmat, disaster response and cleanup was really key to that. We train individuals so that they can clean up, and then we train them to green up. So there's a trajectory there, and there are a lot of opportunities and jobs along that trajectory. Our mission, our motto is we restore hope to the people while providing help for the planet. We create environmental heroes. We have been fortunate to train over 200 individuals in the city of Detroit. Most of them are hard to employ individuals with some really interesting backgrounds.
third of our the people we get to serve are returning citizens. In fact, they're our best students. They're ready for change, and we transform lives doing this. They are not only able to achieve a good job, or even some of them have started their own businesses as a result of that's been one of those unintended sort of benefits that we've been able to capture and say, what can we do to provide extra help to help them become job providers as well. And not many people talk about that, but that has been a real wonderful outcome for the work that we've been able to do, to see them return to our job fairs and be on the other side offering opportunities to incoming new trainees. And so our job training results in terms of achieving employment and or starting their own businesses is at 92% because of that kind of model. We, in terms of the local stuff, while we're able to make certain that they get their OSHA 30 card or their hazmat, HAZWOPER training, or their asbestos and lead so they can remove contaminants, we are talking about resiliency. We're talking about how we can ensure that post-Katrina events or post-weather events or whatever will have the right kind of skill set of individuals who can rebuild communities, who can withstand in the future to come in terms of sustainability. And we look at those things as a way to create that resource. So we can see far out into the future. Their jobs, their careers, our investment in young people to ensure that they're introduced to the natural resources as a trajectory for careers. That's some of the things that we do within our community. So while they're still in high school and even younger, we're employing them over the summer so that they can enjoy and learn about the natural resources. Working with the state of Michigan, we've been able to create a nice little pipeline with the state of Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Michigan State University for post-secondary education opportunities. In fact, Michigan State University has decided to create a special fund to help folks from places like Detroit. Those young people apply for college and to receive the kind of support they'll need to be successful in college. So we're also looking at bringing the young people who have not stepped into made some bad decisions and have some extra hurdles to overcome. We are trying to ensure that they actually get an opportunity to step into these career options and be competitive in the industry as well. So while we are doing that, we also decided we want 100% job placement rate. So we started a company called Green Door Staffing. And we're all about employing the environmental and green collar sector, and also helping young people who may need a little extra help in developing some work skills. There's a lot of work in Detroit, and actually there's a lot of building going on in the city of Detroit, and there's even a desire to ensure that folks are thinking about sustainability and resiliency and all that kind of stuff. So these skill sets they're really desirable for employers. We have a great team of employers who really like what we do, that support us, that provide advice to us as we make certain that we're able to meet their needs going forward. I'm going to stop there and then be happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Wow. And the impetus for this briefing was to show that with all of the national discussion around the Green New Deal, about really figuring out how to address economic issues, infrastructure issues, that people of color-led organizations have already been doing this work. They've already been investing in not only changing people's lives, but addressing climate change, addressing environmental justice and sustainability. So I have a few questions for the panelists, and then I'm going to just make sure to open it up to everyone here to ask a few questions. And just my first question is, you can answer in whatever order, but what barriers existed in creating your program, whether it was financial, policy-based, legislation, et cetera, or even local awareness? What were just some of the struggles in terms of creating your program initially?
No, I was personally
Go ahead, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. I'm not accustomed to that, but thank you very much for having me here. given opportunities you don't have never had. But I would say that initially, the biggest challenge was figuring out a curriculum that would work for a hard-to-place population, kids who've never had really good experience in classes. So we worked on that for almost a year, adult learning techniques, and then developing a curriculum that matched the area of work that they were going into. So it's specialized mathematics. It's not just regular math. It's math where you learn how to measure and those kinds of things. The same thing with reading and study skills. Everything was geared to the jobs that they were going into with lots of hands-on, which is required and when you're dealing with adult learning techniques. That was difficult initially because this was like 1994. And I would say our challenge now is, so I'm so happy to meet this young man, is that developing a curriculum for solar is extremely expensive. We found it to be extremely expensive. So finding ways to partner with other organizations or groups that can help us provide that at a lower cost is really what we desperately need at this point. The other challenge has been really around job placement, because trying to find local hire ordinances, trying to get that through city council without it bumping heads with federal regulations that say you can't have set aside jobs. It's been really difficult for us. So, a project comes to the city of New Orleans and everybody working on the job has come from Mississippi or some other state because the contractors bring in cheap workers who oftentimes aren't well trained. And we trained our young people to walk off an asbestos job if somebody's smoking. I mean, they're really bringing people who aren't trained. So that's been a really, really difficult thing because of the federal statute that says, you can't, if it's federal money involved, you can't have set-aside jobs. And the city trying to come up with local hire ordinances, that's been difficult for us. And they're finding the amount of money, while our program is like 12 weeks. So you have people young men and women who really need to make money. They have child care and so on. So we give them what we call student incentive. But $100 a week or $50 a week doesn't pay the rent. So we also have that butting up against. Those are some of the challenges that we have.
Just to piggyback on what Dr. Wright said, one of the main challenges we've seen is policy, right? And so what I've learned being in the solar sector, if you get in front of the policy and make sure it's drafted correctly, a lot of times you can curb some of these issues. So I spend a lot of time testifying, rewriting bills to make sure there's a carve out for local jobs, training programs, local hire, set asides for low to moderate income projects that serve the low income community, and making sure that when those incentives are in place, they get right down to the individuals who need them. I've seen it before where no one says anything and they have this set aside for 10% LMI, blah, 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 and then everyone writes back and says, oh, but I can't find any minority contract, oh, I can't find any low income, which is bull. Like 90% of the state is low income, right? So it isn't like you can't find them, you just don't want to find them because it costs you more money or you're not invested in that community. And so one of the things we've done is making sure as we write that policy that the workforce is there, right? So that when that bill was passed, there's no contractor that can't come to Maryland and say there's not a local workforce that can do this work. They can't say they're not certified because they're all certified with their NAPSET. The only thing they can say is maybe their background. Well, what we did there was partner with the local union in Maryland, which transfers to other states because Jersey won't hire unless you join the union if you have a felony. But you can transfer in from a union if you come from a different state. And Maryland lets you in for background. So we place them in Maryland, we give them their IBEW card in Maryland, and then they can go to New Jersey, and they can go to Florida, blah, blah, blah. So that policy is important. One of the things we learned in Maryland, things that I messed up in Maryland, I did right in Jersey. So now with the Jersey Clean Energy Bill comes out with Governor Murphy, there's a 51% set aside for low-income projects. There's a requirement that the jobs have to come from the local economy. And so then when you go to your partner, going back to job placement, when you go to the credentials or the individuals who are hiring these folks, they want to come to you because they want to be recognized as the entity or channel partner that helped turn this around for their state. Same thing for GEO. GEO owns private prisons. They get a bad rap because they're in prisons, right? But they're one of the most attentive and investing groups I've ever seen in investing in returning citizens. If you go to their program, they have 13 different programs. They're in school 6 hours a day. They don't have them out there playing basketball all day and football. They're in class. They're in class getting real certifications in their GEDs. And so that's how, when you have the channel partnerships and you go to Duke Power or you go to Florida Power, they can't say no to that. Who's gonna go on national TV and say, no, you know what, we don't wanna hire these returning citizens who are certified and who can now vote. We don't wanna hire them though for these jobs.
So you've not been to Louisiana?
No, I haven't. That's all right. She's got her R. She got it bad. I'm in Maryland. Those are some of the options we face, right?
Let me just quickly add to this and say very succinctly, one of the challenges that we faced was the idea of really helping low to moderate income homeowners and cooperatives in New York City step out and take a chance on the technology of solar powering. There's a whole challenge with sort of making particularly African American and Latino communities comfortable with taking power that's not necessarily coming from a utility company, which is their traditions that they have understood for a long period of time. Helping them break down that cycle of like, this is something that's so novel that like I'm being a guinea pig and experimented on, and the fear of entering into that technology space to provide power for themselves and the empowerment that comes with it. That's challenge number one. Challenge number two was organizing those folks into a market, right? And letting them understand the power that they could wield in terms of saying, when you come together, you can dictate the terms to an installer that says you need to hire locally from our community. Now that's a private sector approach to dealing with this issue. Let me switch to the public sector approach. So I agree with all of the things that have been said about policy changes. I spend a lot of my time working on shifting policy. In the city of New York, where I come from, we have a mayor who has made a commitment that municipal facilities will go to 100% renewable, and is struggling to figure out like, how do we make sure that this local market share is also a part, local workforce share is also a part of making this happen. And you would think that it's rocket science. And when we've demonstrated it in sort of working on the ground with the work that we've done in the 11 buildings that we've organized that are cooperatives. So that's a challenge as well, and working with them to get past that is challenging. And then the final one is really, dealing with the issue of the challenge of sort of having jobs. This is something that you've heard from all of us. And I applaud Rob in what he's doing in Baltimore and other places. We are now exploring a cooperative model so that the folks who we train actually get some ramp and access into ownership of the new green economy. And that's the next step for us in thinking about this. And figuring that out is also a challenge. And so, yes, there are challenges of funding, but we'll figure out knocking on the doors to get that right. But these are some other hurdles that I think are important to also lay out there.
And we've not been without some challenges ourselves. Real quickly, I think in the beginning, helping people understand what the environmental sector, green collar sector, what it is, to convince them that this was something worth taking the time out to take part in. So language and describing what we do has been a challenge over the years in terms of really helping people understand what it is that we do and why this is a unique sector to go into. Once we do that, most of the people that come through our training are folks who have been referred to us through former students and others because they've seen the transformation in the lives of their counterparts. So that's been really helpful. The thing that we have been able to do around policy, the city of Detroit 2 years ago, maybe 3, actually created an ordinance that removed any kind of negativity around returning citizens. Like they removed that question off their applications and other things to say this is a friendly place to get work, right? And we have seen employers kind of get in line with that, the private sector get in line with that. The other deal has been that they've also required a local hiring policy. We have a local hiring policy. Now the deal is we encounter folks who say we can't find the people. And so what they like to do is put whatever the fine is for not hiring them, just pay it to the city. So my challenge lately has been, you know what? City, give me that money, that 5% of the job or whatever that people are paying to help us go to scale, because when folks call us for employees, we don't have them. We need to go to scale. We need to be able to produce more. And if they're just like giving up, we need to be able to show them that this kind of approach works for their bottom line as well, and they don't have to do that. So we're in this negotiations and discussions about that.
And I just want to add one thing.
I'm gonna open it up to questions.
I want to know what you have to say.
Well, let's see, we had, and I'm gonna make sure that when we allow the panelists to give their minute, if Dr. Wright can include her comment in that. Who has questions? I'll start with this woman, and then we'll go right to the next person. Yep.
Thank you. First, I just appreciate all the work that you all are doing. So, as Mr. Corbin-Mark kind of talked about a little bit, we also know that a lot of these environmental justice issues are big creators of disability. We talked about illness in the body, we talked about developmental disabilities, things like that. So, are there any initiatives within any of your organizations that specifically reach out to that set of individuals who because of living in overpopulated areas, have disabling conditions that now, that in addition to being low income, in addition to being Black or brown, are barrier to getting into the workplace? And do any of your programs specifically accommodate those individuals to get them into the workplace?
So real quickly, we just developed a partnership with an organization called Team Wellness, which is a mental health organization specifically addressing those kind of issues and other kind of public health issues. And they have, on average, 8,000 people that they serve a year. And so we set up recruitment fairs and what have you right there in their facilities. And this current cohort, about half of them come from that partnership. And it's been actually a real blessing, because they also provide some additional wraparound support that we typically provide, but that helps to reinforce the work. We do recognize that people are impacted by this work. That's why we do it. That's why this compilation of individuals do the work that we do and others do, because our communities are at ground zero. They are the most impacted and neglected by environmental policy decision making and so forth. So yeah, our whole goal is to meet the needs of people in these communities.
Dr. Wright?
So I would say that dealing with individuals who come to us with a lot of stressors has just been a part of our work. Like, you don't know it until they get in. Like, we have students who are diabetic on insulin. We have to keep the insulin in the refrigerator. We have some kids who are on medication. They're paranoid schizophrenic, and I mean, you don't know. You name it, we've dealt with it. And so now within our program, every Friday we have someone coming in to talk about smoking, to talk about diabetes, to deal with mental health issues. And we have individual counseling that's a part of our program, as well as group counseling. And the individual counseling is the one thing that all the guys say, oh, I'm not doing that. 2 weeks into the program, they want, where's my counselor? I mean, it literally becomes the most popular part of the program. And in the group counseling, they get to hear that things, they all kind of suffered from the same things. So we've been forced to deal with these issues because of the population that we deal with. We go to court with students often. They come in, no, I don't, we're not supposed to ask that question for one thing. But we do say, if you have a prison record, tell us. We won't hold it against you. We just need to know. They say no. Then 2 weeks later, would you write a letter to my parole officer? So this is the population that we deal with. You name it, we've had that issue, from homeless people in the program, people who can't see because their eyes haven't been tested. We find out they need glasses. I mean, just simple things like that are what we deal with on a daily basis.
I think we kind of tie it back to the economics. I mean, you never really know what the impact is on the environmental side. And one of the things in Baltimore is lead. Right? A lot of guys and girls have, have lead poisoning, which affects their ability to learn some of the curriculum and what we go through and so on and so forth. Autism, right? I mean, can we directly tie it to environmental pieces? Probably not. But what I will say is that one of the things we've done, we partnered with an organization called Chimes International, Chimes Foundation, which works with kids with disabilities, and you've probably heard of them. My very first solar farm I did was for them. And when I saw the impact they had on the communities, I definitely joined the board. Now I'm chairman of the board for Chimes. And my point is that everything that we do here is about the people, right? Whether it's individual disabilities, whether it's people who have social disabilities, economic disabilities, you name it. How do we get them on the same playing field? Although you might have to cater the curriculum to make sure the way they learn, because it's a little bit different, the opportunity is still there. However, one thing we face, and I think all of us can speak to this, on the electrical side, DC power will kill you. I tell the guys all the time, this is not like fall off a scaffold. If you mess this up, there are serious results that can come from this. And so we're very careful to make sure that if kids or individuals do have disabilities, that they're functioning in a sense that they can still participate safely on a job site. Because the last thing you want to do is get a phone call saying someone got electrocuted or X, Y, and Z, and have to deal with that from a social perspective, right? And so that's one of the things we face as well.
You can go with your question.
Thank you. This is probably one of the best panels ever in the history of panels and the history of the conference.
Write that down.
We love you. We love you. We really do.
Where's your question?
Given that, I have one comment and then like several questions. It's all
One
concerning-
question.
One,
We're
okay,
limited in
one
time.
one
Yeah.
comment, and the one question is about partnerships. But the comment is to Dr. Wright, and it also concerns partnerships. You mentioned trying to find some of the training partners, and I'm wondering if you're already working with Solar Energy International. If they're based in Peonia, Colorado, but they have an online series of courses, including one that's PV 101, Photovoltaic 101, and there are scholarship programs available. They also have a bilingual for Spanish-speaking entire program dedicated, and they have international people that come in person or online to take classes in Spanish language as well. And I've taken some classes with them, so I'd be happy to connect you if you don't know who they are. And
My technical trainers may very well know, it's just that, I don't.
they may be, but it's they also have a free online kind of mini 101 course that people can just check out. But the main partnership question is I'm wondering how you're working with other environmental justice groups, collaborating with both grid alternatives, the groups that are focused on solar for low-income communities and communities of color, and then how you're also collaborating with groups like Green Latinos who are concerned primarily with environmental justice and reaching people within their own communities and doing the work that you're doing and promoting.
So that answer is a little bit complicated, because first of all, we're in a right to work for nothing state. Unions don't exist for the most part where we are, which creates unbelievable problems for us. Secondly, I'm also in a city that was hit by Katrina. So the use of solar, we have the highest number of houses with solar panels per capita than any place in the United States of America. So we're not afraid of solar because of the experience of Katrina. And thirdly, we've been in a fight of our lives in the city of New Orleans with them now building a new gas plant right in the city where blacks and Vietnamese people live, $231 million, that we don't need a peaking plant for energy where they'll make $11.3 million. And we have a city council that does not understand that we should be changing our trajectory in terms of the future with energy. So it's, if you can understand what I'm saying, we're very confused where we are. We have no unions, we have solar everywhere, people like it. We have a city council voting for a gas plant going in the wrong direction. And we had a plan where the state actually We got tax credits after Katrina for using solar. That's why there's so many solar panels. So, no, I don't know Green Latinos. I've never worked with them. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I don't know them. And the other question was, we're really, really trying hard to make better connections with people who teach and train and develop this solar program, which we've tried before, and it was just too expensive, but I've now met Ron, and I'll look into the other the solar panel organization that I know. My technical trainers who do this work, they absolutely know them because they come to me and we talk, but I just don't know.
So just to say that the building of partnerships is critical to the success of these types of programs. We have partnered with other organizations working in environmental justice communities to share our knowledge and information about how we've been able to do this. We certainly are one of the only places that I'm aware of that is successfully sort of expanding in multifamily affordable housing, solar access. And so that has been something that I think makes us stand out from a lot of other folks. We also work with building partnerships with the unions. Our worker training program, like Dr. Wright's and like Donele's, Donele Wilkins, it's good, Dr. Wilkins, had started out in a partnership with the labor movement. We continue to try to work those partnerships moving forward, and certainly always working with other environmental justice organizations to share what we know and have learned. We should try to get in a couple of other questions.
I'm going to get this question in the back and then I'll come to you in the front.
Hi, my name's Kiera. We're just going to work with Generation Progress, Youth Engagement Arm of Center for American Progress. I understand this panel is mostly about green energy jobs, but to what extent are your organizations dealing with the agricultural jobs that will, be a critical part of moving towards a carbon-free future?
Well, what I can say, we have a youth program called Code Green, Champions of the Detroit's Environment. I spoke about it a little earlier about introducing them to the natural resources as a career path and option for post-secondary education as well as job experience. And what was really key, Detroit, if you don't know, has become a leader in urban agriculture. And for those who don't know sort of the footprint of Detroit, we have, the land mass is one that was built for 2 million people back in its heyday, and right now we have less than 600,000 people in the city of Detroit, and a lot of extra land, if you know what I mean. That being said, our footprint is large enough to accommodate Manhattan, Boston, and San Francisco at the same time. That's how big it is. And so they've taken full advantage of the land for urban agriculture work and for micro food businesses to just all kinds of things to really put forward this whole food security effort.
But how diverse is it?
It's well, right now it's pretty diverse, and the leaders have really been black farmers and what have you. Though there has been a lot of new residents to come to town that's taken, put a stake down in certain parts of the city for urban agriculture and the business around that. But I think there's a strong effort to ensure that people indigenous to the city also taking full advantage of that. So we have thousands of urban gardens and that kind of thing. But to the point about young people, what we ensure is that our young people get to experience what it means to work on a farm, and also what it means in terms of the full scope of food production and development, and even the current policy conversations and necessities around food security. Because I mentioned earlier that our land has been impacted by a lot of industrial hazardous waste, that kind of thing. So we've been a leader in ensuring that the property that farmers take on in our community is healthy soil and all those kind of things. So testing the soil and understanding what that means to build, different kinds of mechanisms for that. One of our former students actually partnered up with someone else, and they started an urban farm called Neighborhood Bug, Building Urban Gardens. And they have taken this thing to deal even with indoor production, I forget, hydroponics and all of that. They've applied their construction skills from our program to build houses and do a number of things, and then employ local youth in their neighborhood to actually produce that and sell at the open market, the food market, Detroit Eastern Market. So there is some efforts to introduce. I'm all about the green economy, and it is not limited, though it's wonderful about solar. That's one of those elements, but we're talking about across the board. We don't want to limit those opportunities and things to just one sector of the economy.
We limit ours, right? We want to be the best at what we do in the solar space. And so, and in terms of ag, the main things we look at is how do we turn that farmland that was getting $300 to $200 an acre for soybeans and corn into solar farms, which are giving farmers 2,000 to 3,000 acres. That's one of the big conversions. Number two is grow facilities. There's a huge influx of marijuana grow facilities throughout the country. You see it's a huge industry. There's billions of dollars being spent for these facilities, making sure that people that are trained that can actually create the infrastructure, the battery stores, the lighting, the LED lighting, the solar around that. Not necessarily the planting and growing and all this other stuff, but the infrastructure behind that. That's what we see the most opportunities.
And we have to teach them that you can't smoke marijuana and go on a job. You're gonna get tested and you lose it. That's been a problem for us. So building the culture behind it, the same way you can't go on a job drunk, you can't go on a job high from marijuana. Even if it is legalized, you cannot. So that's another thing that has popped up in our council. You know, it's legal. I'm like, not on the job.
All right, we'll take this question right here in front.
So I know a lot of people talked about policy changes, but it seems mostly on state and local levels. Is there anything that here at the federal level we can do to aid in these training and job production, and what kind of solutions can we take back from this and bring to our bosses and say this is what we should focus on?
Well, I would just like to add that the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences that has this training program, and the monies for the Environmental Careers Program has been stuck at $3 million for the last 25 years. It has not gone up, even showing, the payback to society. Even that has not increased that appropriation. And we see this unbelievable infrastructure that's there already, to help them begin working in renewable energy. So anything that can be done, to help bring more dollars into that sector. And it's been cyclical. Remember when brownfields was the thing? And they pushed a lot of money into brownfields, and then that got pulled back. Well, this program has been consistent, but it's been stuck at $3 million for 25 years.
The other thing, so my neighbor is Flint, Michigan, and there's a lot of discussion about that. How can the federal policy infrastructure help in terms of job training and investing in infrastructure? I know that's been a conversation. But water infrastructure is huge. It's a huge need. And one of the things that we've been discussing in the consortium is really taking the scale of water training around stormwater management, training around wastewater treatment, ensuring that lead is no longer an issue in our communities. So these policies work together. Policy drive economies, right? And so there's an investment. I know EPA had a long time a job training program. Their water program could use some resources to help us take these programs to scale. We have to clean these bodies of water. I mean, no one really talks about what made Flint River so dirty. And I'm going to say industry, General Motors, that it was a one-town company kind of deal. No one talks about why it was dirty, right? In the city of Detroit, 400 companies get to legally discharge into the Detroit River. You talk about policy. So those impacts do create opportunities in terms of jobs, right? We look at wetlands being destroyed and other things like that. Those kind of investments in workforce development it can translate into rebuilding, creating resiliency and sustainability in our local communities. So this committee, the Energy Committee, is huge to help sort of cross sectors, if you will. Because one thing that's cool about the environmental justice movement is we've been able to see from a bird's eye view that if agencies and entities work together, we can get at some real problems. If HUD and EPA are working together, and other Department of Energy and other agencies, the Interagency for Environmental Justice.
So one, the federal government is a property owner. If they use their property to help drive down greenhouse gases, they could convert federal property across the 50 states to solar or another type of renewable energy, but obviously an advocate for solar work at this particular point in time. They could use that as an opportunity to spur jobs in those local communities where local people in impacted communities, frontline communities, are trained. So that's one opportunity. Office of General Services manages federal property across the 50 states. Let's use that as an opportunity to transform. Number two, yes, definitely, as others on the panel have mentioned, invest in workforce training. But there's also a need, I think, locally to help some municipalities, smaller municipalities, to understand what it means to sort of make that conversion. The Department of Energy has a ton of resources to help sort of municipalities and cities go that way, and they could be a catalyst for sort of unleashing another set of jobs through municipal actions. Municipal governments also own property, and state governments also own property. And if the federal government wanted to sort of lend their capacity to helping municipalities move that could be a tremendous sort of marketplace that opens up in terms of helping us both deal with the climate crisis and creating access to jobs for those types of communities. A third thing is to really think about what it means to be able to support these types of training programs with some of the skills that we need in terms of math training. The NAPSAT is an incredibly challenging thing for a lot of people in our programs to go through and actually be successful in. And so what about deploying, for example, or creating a math core of folks who could go to communities, support these types of training programs, and help in the same way that you think of AmeriCorps. Maybe there is a way in which that type of project at the federal level could actually help us really tackle those particular challenges in a mass way that helps us get over the hurdle. And then we talked about the issue of not just funding training, but there has to be a real need that this has to be a qualified substitute for people to not necessarily be tempted or lured back into the economy that may have got them into trouble in the first place. And so we don't need just only money for training, but we also need money to pay for stipends and for transportation, and sometimes even for work clothing for folks to be able to get there, or childcare in some instances, right? We had almost 200 women come through our training program, and a lot of them talk about that as a reality for what's going on, and some of the men too, because childcare is not just a woman's job. And so really thinking about the ways in which these programs can be supported, not just through the actual dollars for training, but the supports that are necessary to help move these programs forward, are things that are ways in which the federal government, I think, could actually intervene and get some.
Can I add two things to that real quick? Tax credits, right? Tax credits. I'm a business guy, right? So all the credit and financing for me, we fund around our own training. How do you incentivize companies to go green, right? Right. There has to be the investment tax credits is important because with that 30% buy down of your debt on your system, it turns a 14-year ROI into a 7-year, which makes it a good investment, right? Number two, educating LMI communities on opportunity zones, right? This program is coming out where there's additional incentives for mostly land that's in the communities we're trying to serve, and then people don't even know the benefits of the land they got.
What's an LMI?
Low to moderate, I'm sorry.
Just one
Oh,
of
that's
those.
wait, low to moderate.
Low to moderate income communities.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sorry. And 90% of the opportunity zones are in the low to moderate income communities. And then with the additional incentives there, you take a deal that has maybe a 10 to 12% return on investment, now it's 30%. So in terms of bringing money into the communities, that's huge. Problem is about the education piece, we're gonna miss that also. And so if there's some type of way that they can help educate those communities, so they're not giving away the land to big business that comes in, and they miss this whole 10-year opportunity. Yep.
Okay, we are officially 15 minutes over. That means that we need to have more of these panel discussions here on Capitol Hill. And is that what that means?
Yes.
We need to have more? Okay, great. I am going to allow the panelists to just give some really like 30-second short comments to close, and then we're gonna wrap it up and then allow you all to talk, but then we have to be out of here by 11:30. So, very quickly, Cecil, 30 seconds.
So we've tackled 3 types of multifamily affordable housing: low to moderate cooperatives, public housing, and mission-driven 501c3 affordable housing operators. We recruited 11 co-ops into an aggregated market. Through that process, we're gonna build 270 kilowatts of direct current to offset their common area charges. That benefits 900 residents. We're gonna save those buildings $59,000 in electric bills in their first year of solar operation, and $1.7 million over the lifetime of the solar panels themselves. We'll be displacing pollution. We will be hiring people, have hired people locally, and we've done Spanish trainings as well as exploring the future of a co-op model. This is a project that works. This is what a Green New Deal looks like in action, and we don't need Congress to act for us to be able to do these things locally. When they get their act together, that'd be great, but we as communities of color are doing this on the ground now, today.
Dr. Wright.
Well, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences Worker Training Program is a model that has been in existence for the last 25 years. It is a very successful model. The infrastructure exists for us to continue moving to renewable energy, solar, wind, all of these other things in terms of training, to give our communities the hand up that they need to have a quality life and make the amount of money that they need to support their families.
Sure.
Robert.
In terms of our mission, it's all online, but what I want to do is challenge you guys, right? We are the force, we're the voice of the people that are typically underserved. If you look at people in this room, most of you are not low to moderate income, right? So it's a responsibility of each of us to make sure we go back to our communities and educate. We go back to our communities and push what's the importance of having these types of programs in place. Because if we don't do it, they're not going to have a voice. And all of us can shout all year long on Capitol Hill, it's not going to happen. It takes each and every one of you and your Facebook network and your Instagram network, you pushing the mission behind how we include inclusion, equal inclusion in the green economy. And so that's what I leave you, that's what I challenge you with, to go back, and when you see these things pop up on your social media, make sure you address it. Speak out about what the opportunities are and how you can have an impact.
So we transform lives by investing in people. We restore hope in the people while providing help to the planet. We do the things that make it worth living in a thriving, healthy community. It's all about a just world, a just community. Environmental justice means just that we are working to achieve the quality of life that everyone as a human being is entitled to. This little program.
Well, we definitely want to thank the Office of Donele McEachin. We want to make sure that you connect with us. Find us online at weact.org. Also follow us on Twitter at weact. And make sure that you touch base with us afterwards, but we are very limited in time. We have to get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We see that we need to have more of these conversations, so we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.